Boots on stone stairs, a dripping pipe, a single light bulb swinging above a cellar door. Hidden beneath ordinary buildings, these interrogation suites were not offices at all. They were waiting rooms for death, where screams were swallowed by thick walls and resistance was broken bone by bone. Tonight, we descend into those secret rooms where light never lingered, screams were swallowed by thick walls, and resistance was broken bone by bone. Watch until the end, for the final truth will expose how these chambers did not just destroy flesh. They were designed to erase the very idea of defiance. Regensburg, Germany. Posters of Hitler glared from walls, and whispers carried more danger than gunfire. In this climate lived Lucas Brenner, 23 years old. The son of a cobbler, he was a seminarian studying for the priesthood. His life until then had been defined by gentleness, the quiet rhythm of prayer, the scent of incense rising in chapels, the worn pages of the Psalms. He had never imagined himself part of politics, and yet politics had found him. By 1942, the Nazis had brought the church under their iron grip. Crucifixes were stripped from classrooms. Religious processions were forbidden. Sermons had to be cleared by party officials. To question was to risk prison, or worse. Lucas belonged to a small circle of seminarians who secretly circulated copies of Mitbrennender Sorge, a banned papal encyclical condemning Nazi ideology. They tucked leaflets into prayer books, whispered passages during late-night prayers, and slipped messages beneath the doors of church members. For the Gestapo, this was not faith. It was sedition. It happened on an October morning. Lucas had just left morning prayers when a black car rolled to a stop at the curb. Two plainclothes officers stepped out. Neighbors saw him pressed into the back seat, his face pale, his lips moving as if in silent prayer. The car did not head to the prison. Instead, it pulled into a government building, ordinary above, sinister below. The iron door closed, and Lucas descended into the underworld. The cellar was narrow, suffocating. The walls were wet with mildew, the air metallic with the tang of old blood. Down the corridor, doors lined the walls, each padded to swallow sound. A guard shoved him into a chamber where an iron chair stood bolted to the floor. The only light came from a bare bulb overhead, its glare merciless. The interrogator entered, dressed not in uniform but in a suit, as if about to conduct an interview. He carried a clipboard, his tone soft, almost courteous. He asked Lucas for names. Who else circulated the encyclicals? Who printed the leaflets? Where were they distributed? Lucas stayed silent. His silence was not defiance, it was prayer. The interrogator nodded to the guard. The first blow landed without warning, a truncheon driven into his stomach. Air fled his lungs in a strangled gasp. More blows followed, each punctuated by the same questions, calm and relentless. When Lucas doubled over, they strapped his wrists to the chair and forced his head back with a leather strap. Then came the water cure. A cloth was pressed over his mouth. Jug after jug of icy water poured down until he convulsed, gagging, drowning while still breathing. His body thrashed against the iron chair, his mind suffocating long before his lungs. The interrogator, expression unreadable, noted each response. To him, this was procedure. To Lucas, it was the descent into hell. He gave no names. The torment stretched for days. They stripped him naked and left him on the freezing stone floor, his body shaking uncontrollably. Cigarettes were pressed against his skin, leaving blistering burns. Splinters were forced beneath his fingernails until his hands shook with agony. Between sessions, he was thrown into darkness, left with nothing but the sound of his own heartbeat and the faint echo of screams through the corridor walls. Above ground, clerks typed reports, officials signed papers, and secretaries filed documents. Life went on in bureaucratic rhythm, as if nothing were happening beneath their feet. That was the true horror, the normality of cruelty. By November, Lucas was nearly unrecognizable. His face was swollen, one eye sealed shut. He could no longer walk without collapsing. Still, they demanded names. "Just one name, and this ends," the interrogator whispered. Lucas trembled, then spoke, but not a name. "Non tradam fratres meos." I will not betray my brothers. Barely alive, he was dragged to Dachau, a camp for religious prisoners. The young seminarian from Regensburg died weeks later, officially from pneumonia. Fellow prisoners remembered his vow, "I will not betray." But Lucas was only one voice swallowed by those underground rooms. Even as his silence echoed in Regensburg's cellars, another prisoner was being dragged below in Warsaw. Not a priest, but a courier. In her satchel she carried secrets, and the Gestapo would stop at nothing to wrench them from her. What she endured would push the very definition of interrogation into something that could scarcely be called human. Warsaw, 1942, Gestapo headquarters. Her name was Zofia Majewska. 26 years old, she carried the quiet bravery of a schoolteacher and the unshakable resolve of someone who had already lost too much. Warsaw was her classroom, her battlefield, her prison. When the Nazis sealed the ghetto, Zofia's younger brother was trapped inside. She smuggled bread at first, then medicine, then messages, tiny folded notes hidden beneath the lining of her satchel. By 1942, she had become a courier for the underground, ferrying intelligence between Jewish resistance groups and the Polish Home Army. Her weapons were not guns, but paper, words, and the courage to walk with steady steps past checkpoints. That courage ended one winter night. The Gestapo had intercepted a coded message, traced it to a courier, and set a trap. She was caught at the station, her satchel seized, her wrists clamped in iron cuffs. She was not taken to prison, not immediately. She was dragged below. The cellar beneath Warsaw's Sucha Avenue Gestapo headquarters was infamous. Survivors called it the labyrinth, a maze of concrete corridors lined with doors that led to agony. Each chamber was soundproofed, its floor sloped to drain blood and water. Prisoners said you could smell despair before you saw it, a stench of sweat, mold, and scorched flesh that clung to the stones. Zofia was pushed into one of those rooms. A bare bulb glared down, its light a spotlight of humiliation. Her satchel lay open on the table, its contents spilt. Notebooks, ration cards, a child's photograph of her brother. The officer in charge leafed through them with casual disdain. He asked only one question: who else? Her silence was immediate. But inside, fear clawed at her. What if her brother suffered because of her? What if her friends were already betrayed? The interrogator's voice blurred with the echo of boots scraping across the concrete floor. She clenched. The first hours were a blur of fists and boots. Two men beat her with military precision, striking her ribs, face, and spine until she collapsed. They dragged her upright again, forcing her hands against the wall. Her breath came ragged, blood dribbling from her mouth. Still, she gave no names. So they escalated. Her wrists were bound behind her and attached to a hook in the ceiling. They hoisted her upward until her shoulders tore under the strain. This was the strappado, a medieval cruelty resurrected in the 20th century. Each time her body sagged, joints wrenched further apart. She bit her lip until it split, trying not to scream. The interrogator recorded her silence with a frown, then nodded. The guards lowered her just enough to let her feet brush the floor. A bucket was brought in. Water sloshed, then a rag. The drowning ritual began. Cloth pressed over her mouth, liquid poured in relentless waves. She gagged, thrashed, suffocated in cycles, brought back only to be drowned again. And still, no names. Her defiance was not loud, She did not spit at them or curse. It was quieter, more dangerous. She simply withheld. For the Gestapo, this refusal to break was intolerable. They changed tactics. Torture became psychological. She was left in darkness for days, hearing only the screams of others echoing through the walls. They returned with photographs, her brother and her parents, threatening their lives if she did not comply. They read out addresses, schools, church parishes, making her believe the noose around her family was tightening with each breath. And yet, Zofia resisted. On the fifth day, her body was nearly unrecognizable. Her face was swollen, her shoulders dislocated, her lips cracked from dehydration. She could no longer stand without collapsing. The guards had grown impatient. One muttered that she was already dead, only walking. They took her to a cold, small room with hooks. Stripped and degraded, she was forced to kneel naked on broken glass, each shard piercing her knees. The interrogator asked again, "Who else?" With swollen eyes, Zofia silently prayed, a whisper of faith, not defiance, echoing a prayer she'd taught her students. To the men around her, it was meaningless, but for Zofia, it was victory, the refusal to let them own her final words. What became of her afterwards is uncertain. Records vanish in fragments. Some testimonies claim she was executed in Pawiak prison weeks later. Others say she died in the very cellar where she was tortured, her body buried in rubble when the headquarters was bombed. What is certain is this: her satchel, the one seized the night she was caught, was later found among Gestapo archives. The photograph of her brother remained inside, untouched, preserved. Zofia's silence shows us the purpose of these secret rooms. They were not built to uncover truth, but to erase resistance itself. But there was another kind of prisoner dragged below, neither seminarian nor courier. A man's dangerous knowledge led to his capture, transforming interrogation into a scientific display of torture. These rooms were not just for punishment, but laboratories of pain. Prague, 1943. The city appeared calm under the iron fist of Nazi occupation. Cafes open, trams running, officials in polished boots walking across cobblestones. But beneath the surface, a shadow network of Czech resistance worked tirelessly, feeding intelligence to London, sabotaging supply lines, and protecting what little freedom remained. Among them was Dr. Emil Varga, a physician at Charles University. He was 41, a man with spectacles perched on a narrow face and hands trained for healing. But Emil's true weapon was not the scalpel, it was information. In hospital wards and operating theaters, he quietly documented what he saw: records of German officers treated for wounds, lists of troop movements, whispers from soldiers delirious under anesthesia. These notes were passed to resistance couriers, hidden in medical texts, smuggled across borders. By 1943, the Gestapo knew there was a leak. They did not know who, until Emil was betrayed by an orderly under torture. He was seized during morning rounds, dragged still wearing his white coat, his stethoscope clattering to the ground. He did not see the university again. Instead, he was taken not to a prison cell, but below, the basement of the Peček Palace, the Gestapo headquarters in Prague. The palace was a grand building above ground with decorative staircases, marble halls. But its cellars were a world apart: low-ceilinged rooms, damp walls painted a sickly yellow, hooks and rings bolted to stone. Survivors called it the House of Pain. Emil was thrown into one of these chambers. The interrogator greeted him not with shouts, but with polite formality, as though about to begin a medical consultation. Papers lay on the desk before him, intercepted notes, coded reports. The questions began softly, clinical, detached. Who are your contacts? Who carries the files? Who do you serve? Emil gave the same answer each time. Silence. The tortures began. First came the beatings, calculated blows to the kidneys, ribs, and stomach. But soon the methods turned disturbingly medical. They strapped him to a metal table, securing his wrists and ankles. The interrogator, flanked by a man in a physician's coat, brought out instruments Emil knew too well: forceps, clamps, scalpels. What followed was not interrogation, but desecration. They made incisions in his flesh, not to kill, but to study his reactions. They drove needles beneath his fingernails, recording how long it took before he lost consciousness. They applied electric current through wet electrodes on his temples, noting each convulsion with clinical precision. The tormentors called this enhanced questioning. To Emil, it was the corruption of medicine itself, the oath to heal inverted into an oath to destroy. Blinded, chemically tortured, and subjected to hypothermia, suffocation, and burns. He refused to reveal his sources. The cruelty was systematic. This was not the blind rage of a god. It was experimentation disguised as interrogation. For Emil, the pain was not only physical. It was the knowledge that men of his own profession, doctors, had abandoned every trace of humanity, turning medicine into a weapon. One evening, the interrogator entered with a new tactic. On the table lay a folder containing the names of Czech students arrested after the assassination of Reinhard Heydrich. The officer leaned close, whispering that Emil's refusal would condemn even more young lives. It was a lie, but a cunning one. Emil's heart wavered. He saw the faces of his students, bright with questions in lecture halls, eager to heal rather than harm. He wanted to protect them. But then he remembered Lucas Brenner, the seminarian he had once heard about through underground whispers, a man who had chosen silence over betrayal. Emil clenched his jaw, his bloodied lips shaping the same vow. Non tradum. I will not betray. The punishment was swift. They suspended him by his wrists, dislocating his shoulders. Hours passed before they cut him down, his body collapsing in a heap. He could no longer walk unaided. By the end of January 1943, Emil was a broken man physically, but not in spirit. Prisoners later recalled hearing him murmur fragments of lectures in the darkness, teaching anatomy to cellmates as though the cellar were still a classroom. His voice trembled, but his mind remained unyielding. His final hours are uncertain. Some accounts say he was executed by firing squad. Others claim he succumbed to untreated injuries, buried in an unmarked grave near the palace. What endures is testimony. The notes of survivors who whispered his name, keeping alive the memory of a doctor who refused to turn healing into betrayal. Nazis brutally tortured seminarians, a courier and a physician seeking to break them, not extract information. Lucas, Zofia, and Emil's stories of enduring immense suffering survived through whispers and smuggled notes, proving hope endured. This history warns us, evil hides anywhere. Memory is our defense. Like our video, share these stories and subscribe to Resistance Voices to keep their names alive. Their warning persists, though the cellar walls are gone.